We never, ever had the intentions of killing anybody. Admittedly, we wanted to hurt the people for what they did to that kid, you know. As I've knocked on the door, the bouncer answered, and I don't know why, but he threw me a punch, but I got a gun on him, and the rest was just instantaneous, you know, instinct. I was born in North London, Chalk Farm, 1948, and pretty poverty-stricken childhood. There was 7 of us in 2 rooms. My dad was in prison quite a lot. My mum couldn't cope with all the kids, you know. So it was a bit... but you don't know any different when you're a kid. It's only when you look back on it, you think, oh, that was tough, you know. People were a lot more friendly then. Nobody locked their front doors. It was always half a brick holding the door open. In the street, you could go into any house to escape from the police or whatever, cup of tea or whatever. Yeah, it was more neighbourly.
And what were you like as a child?
A bloody nuisance, I should imagine. I noticed when you're in like primary school and nursery or things like that, they required you to sleep after lunch and all, which was completely impossible for me. So I became a bit of a headache to them. One of my friends I used to play truant with was Cat Stevens. His name was Stephen Georgia when I knew him, but we used to go in, book in it, morning register, and then just off, you know, wander about London all day. Yeah.
Your mother left you in care and then you went to an approved school?
Approved school was the first one, yeah. That was mainly because, well, you could get approved school in them days just for playing truant, you know, from school. They were all mostly run on threats and brutality, you know. That's how they kept their order. And there was, well, things they did in them days were today is considered child abuse, you know. I didn't consciously choose to lead a criminal life. It was just the environment and the people around me.
And how long were you in those kind of institutions for?
Well, after a series of children's homes, I went to approved school. That lasted about 2.5 years. And then after that, there was Borstal, which is run on a sort of military-style basis. Boots and gaiters, you know, marshalling around. And again, the end threat was brutality, you know. But I seemed to escape from everywhere. They banged me up, you know. I escaped from Borstal about 3 times. I don't know, for me as a kid, it was just used to running free around the streets. Being locked up was unnatural. Funny enough, it was my spell at Borstal where I met a few friends. I happened to bump into one in later years when I got out, who seemed to be doing quite well. And he invited me to join him. And it turned out they were bank robbers, you know. I started off as a driver because people recognised my ability of driving and what have you. And then you slowly progressed to working for firms in North London, South London, East London, West London. And it got to the stage where we just got tired of jumping out the backs of transits, 6-handed or whatever. And by the time you had to cut up, it never seemed to be much of a payback for the chances you were taking, you know. So we decided to leave them, dispense with shotguns and stealing cars and all that sort of stuff. So we bought handguns and shoulder holsters, bought the cars out the evening news, And we used to go out dressed up, just cruising. We could even stay in the pool off the old bill, you know. And as soon as we spotted a security van pulling up, we'd jump out and have it on the spot, you know. Sometimes we might have two in one day or whatever. So there came the point we just didn't know what to do with all the money. Everywhere was overflowing with money. We bought houses, cars, boats, and we decided we better retire. So I'd moved out to Kent, bought a house out there, and I remember sitting in the garden when the phone went. It was my pal who phoned me up. He said, "How you doing, John?" I said, "How's that?" He said, "I'm fucking bored." You know, he said, "So am I." He said, "Get the tools out, let's go to work." We were supposed to have met a guy in a pub who had a couple of businesses for sale. We thought, oh, if we can buy a few businesses, we'll get a legal income, and then we can really retire, you know. But the guy didn't show up, and by the time we realised he's not going to show, we'd had a few drinks, sort of got the flavour, and stayed out. We ended up at this club in Hackney called the Cricketers. Anyhow, I don't know why it was, but somebody took umbrage at us because they thought it was a bit too flash, because we was buying everybody drinks, but we just wanted to keep that party atmosphere going, you know. Everyone was enjoying themselves. There was a few muppets down there. Suddenly it kicked off. Anyhow, me and my pal, we sort of fought our way to the door and got out. But as we were halfway up the stairs, we heard these blood-curdling screams coming from within, you know. So we realised there was an acquaintance of his been left behind. Just a young kid named John Dove, his name was, out with his girlfriend. And so we thought, oh, he's still in there. So we had to fight our way back in. And I must iterate that we never, ever had the intentions of killing anybody. Admittedly, we wanted to hurt the people for what they did to that kid, you know. But as I've knocked on the door, the bouncer answered, and I don't know why, but he threw me a punch, but I got a gun on him, and the rest was just instantaneous, you know, instinct. That didn't stop the forward momentum, just carried on into the club and looking for the other perpetrators, you know. And out of frustration, sort of shot the bar up and just virtually terrified everybody, you know. Me being me, I just didn't know when to give up, you know. So I was still armed at the time. And you didn't have the prevalence of armed police as you've got today. So fortunately for me, they weren't armed, so they scattered. So I jumped back in the Aston Martin and battered the car out of the driveway. But I'm now in the street, but I can't get past a Rover and a police van, like that. So I don't know why, I just fired at the blue light on the top, and the car reversed about 30 miles an hour. You couldn't even see the driver. That was what I got arrested for and got life sentence for murder, yeah.
So you got life for murder?
I got life with a minimum of 20 years.
How did you feel when you received that verdict?
I didn't really know what a life sentence was either. But I do remember it's still a bit of a shock. And I know my family were in pieces over it, you know. But I don't know, it was what it was. I just had to get on with it, you know. I went to Brixton on remand, and then they quickly took me out of there and sent me to Wandsworth. From Wandsworth, I went to the Wormwood Scrubs, and from Wormwood Scrubs, they sent me up to Wakefield. And I virtually did a tour of the whole British Isles, every prison I've lost count of the prisons I went to. Of course, they made me category A, which is supposed to be, if you were to escape, you'd be an embarrassment to the government and a danger to the public, or whatever. In the early days, you couldn't move. You were literally escorted everywhere with a dog handler and 4 screws, you know. The only beauty of that is you got to the front of the queue on everything, you know. You got fed first, you got your canteen first. But you literally couldn't breathe in there, checking on you every quarter now. You had to move cells every 3 months. In case you were digging a tunnel, you could never finish it, you know. So it was all, everything was uprooting all the time. You could never settle. The funny thing with me, I think what helped me immensely through that sentence was my brother Terry. He was only 10 months younger than me. And he committed suicide at the beginning of my sentence. And it completely knocked me for 6, you know. I couldn't get my head around it. It left me with no fear to face the opposition. You know, schools come in to give me a hiding, I'd run towards them rather than run away. And being the cowards that they are, well, I had 6 solid years of brutality, and in the end they just gave up on it. Which if it weren't for my fitness or whatever, I don't think I would have survived it. Some of them screws are about 20 stone, you know what I mean? When they sit on your chest, you're in danger of getting crushed, rupture your spleen or whatever, which I know has happened to a few guys. For the most part, the screws were all ex-squatters in them days, big fat beer guts, you know. They could only have a row for about 30 seconds and they're all puffing and panting, you know. The worst prison I went to for that was a place up in Yorkshire called Armley. It was a local jail. And out I spy on one day, they said, Massey, we're coming in a minute, we're going to break your back. And I said, oh, come on in, get on with it. And it's not long before they overpower you. They come in with, in the early days, it used to be a mattress, but now they've got these plastic shields and sort of body armour and all that sort of stuff. But they handcuff me behind my back and then they drag you down the stairs to the segregation unit by your feet so that your head hits every step on the fucking way down, you know. And I actually got amnesia once. I woke up in a strong box. I couldn't remember my own name. I think it wasn't for about 3 weeks I started piecing things together, you know.
Were you able to form relationships with your fellow prisoners if you were being moved around so much? Did you find friendships in there?
Yeah, I had friends wherever I went. But the beauty of the old days with your sort of old gangsters and your old bank robbers, no matter where you got transferred in the country, there'd always be someone there that knew you was coming and meet you at the gate or whatever, settle you in, see that you're all right. I remember I got to, the first time I went to Parkhurst, it was Reggie Craig that first met me, 2 carrier bags full of goodies, which is nice, you know. Today you get in prison, it's dog eat dog, they don't give a shit. You sort of got to find your own way.
So obviously your sentence did get extended while you were in prison. Yeah, was it 3 or 4 total escape attempts that you...
I think it was 4 altogether. When I first in prison, I think it was after a year or 2 years, I got a visit and my curiosity got the better of me. I had to it was a police visit. They tried to offer me 5 years and out. They said, look, we'll take you to Chiswick police station, you'll have a suite of cells, you can do what you like, have your own food, you can have your wife, your girlfriend, but you've got to cough up your mates. And, well, you know what my answer was. I don't think it would have mattered the length of a sentence. I just think it's unnatural to be locked up. And they're their rules. They're not my rules. They're man-made laws. I didn't make them. God didn't make them. And but the main thing that drove me was family. For instance, my last escape from Pentonville, I begged and pleaded with the governor to allow me to go and see my mother, who was dying from a brain tumour. And it was like talking to a brick wall, just refused.
Was it true at Pentonville you just like threw a rope over the wall and...
No, it's not as easy. I think the newspapers tried to stereotype it by saying they found knotted sheets hanging over the wall and all that. That's no nonsense, no. I was headhunted by the gym staff to build an office roof. Plus, I was a bit handy with the tools and maintain the gym equipment, which gave me access to the tool cupboard. And but I'd already started that job before I got refused permission to go and see my mum. By the time I decided they weren't going to allow me, I was already quite embedded in the gym as a gym orderly. And I thought, okay, I'm going to get out. So the staff toilets and showers and that, when they had a washing machine that, which we were allowed to use to wash the gym kit, I noticed there was a trap door in the ceiling with a padlock and bolt on it. So I managed to lever the bolt so that it bypassed the padlock. And I got up into the loft space for about 10 minutes a day with the spanners undoing the bars. And they was heavier, must have weighed about 400 weight, these bars. And I remember when I got the final bolt out, I had to struggle and let it down gently. If I'd have dropped it, it had gone right through the ceiling. And it had all been on top, you know. But underneath the bars, there was a sort of square tunnel with a concrete glass skylight above it. And from the cell block, I used to be able to see out the window onto the roof of the gym. And I could tell that I could get through that, you know. So over a period, I managed to get equipment up into the loft space and get to work on the skylight. But the beauty of that was I'd bypassed all the razor wire, all the cameras, because I'm coming out of the roof and not going over it. So when I was on top of the roof, you got about 2 foot of wall left, right? And I'm terrified of heights. I remember crawling on all fours across a motorway bridge once because I had vertigo, you know. So I knew that I had to get over that wall quickly, otherwise I'd never make it. So I tied a bit of rope around my arm from a 5-a-side goalpost. And as I come out the skylight, without looking, I just dived straight over the wall, hanging on to this bit of string. And but I ended up falling 3/4 of the way because it unravelled too quick, you know. And unfortunately, I landed about 10 feet away from the screw going home. And but luckily for me, he was a mild-mannered guy. He wasn't a landing screw. He worked in the stores. I knew him quite well. His name was George. And when he found his voice, he started, John, what the hell do you think you're doing? I just said, sorry, George, I ain't got time to rabbit. And I just flew past him over the wall to the flats and away. I got away. And I got to see my mum. And the smile on her face was beatific when she saw me. And that's something they can never, ever take away from me. And I said to the owner, you, I did it. Had you let me out, I'd have come back on my own. You know?
And each time you escaped, was your sentence extended?
Yeah, of course. Well, as you know, a life sentence. Well, take for instance, my co-defendant only served 14 years. And I've virtually done 3 times that. So, and I got a minimum of 20, all right, so I more than doubled that. You know, I did 23 years more than the minimum. But the thing is, there's no maximum. You could get a minimum sentence, but there's no ceiling. You can literally stay in prison till the day you die, which I was threatened with many a time. You're going to die in prison, Massey, unless you give it a 3 bags full, yes sir, no sir, and all that, which is just against my nature. You know.
Do you regret your escapes?
No. No, I'd do it all over again. You lock any living creature up in a cage, first thing it does is circle that cage looking for a weakness, doesn't it? I mean, even a plant you put in a dark corner, it will grow towards the light. So to threaten people with more prison if you attempt to escape in prison just seems ludicrous to me. And it never deterred me anyway.
For a time, I think, you served 43 years, and I think that made you England's longest serving prisoner.
Yeah.
How did it feel to know?
Well, that was a title I certainly didn't want. No. I mean, people get saying, oh, like Bronson's, well, he can have it with jam on top. I don't want it, you know. But I thought, how can I be the worst roaming British Isles? I can't be. You know, you got this craze, you had the Richardsons, and you got all these child killers and genocide people. Why am I top dog? That tells me that they're saying I'm worse than all the rest of them. And I refuse to believe that. You know.
And you were released in 2018. How was the lead up to your release?
In their wisdom, they almost decided that I should be banned from Category D prisons, open prisons. So I had to go to this new guinea pig of, I think it was Blunkett, I don't know, called Warren Hill. It's in Norfolk or Ipswich, somewhere like that. Again, it was enclosed. There was a wall around it or a fence around it. And you had to go through these courses, stages, and complete it to stage 3 or whatever it was. Then you got a parole board and you stood a chance of getting out, you know. And also I grew this beard as well, because every parole board I ever went on the top of the record, sitting on the desk, was a young picture of me. And I thought to myself, they keep looking at that photograph and think, oh, he looks young and fit, he could do another 10 stretch, you know. So I grew this beard, looking old, and I walked in a bit doddery. Yeah, lo and behold, I got parole. So I couldn't really believe it.
How did it feel being free?
Like being born again. It was lovely. I still got a picture of my sister and my niece meeting me outside the gate. And you look at that picture, you can't help but smile, because the smiles on their faces just glow with happiness, you know. Yeah, it was great.
How old were you when you went into prison?
I was 26 when I went in. I was 70 when I come out. Or thereabouts, yeah. I'm 75 now.
I suppose you can never get all that time that you served back, but...
No, I'm not. I'm never going to live as long as I spent in prison, no. But it's no good crying over spilled milk. What's done is done, you know. Just got to make the best of what's left.
And what are you spending your time doing now?
I still do the odd job, carpentry and that, which I enjoy. It's not like work for me, it's more of a hobby. And I go to the gym every day. I've got a fantastic partner. Yeah, things are good, very good, yeah. But I find I'm often asked, have I got a message for like young kids or whatever, sort of making their way into that sort of life. I really find that you can't get through to them. Maybe something like that. But even something like that, as so traumatic as that sentence was, you've got young kids out there, they're going to think there's some sort of glamour in it. That is absolutely not. It certainly isn't glamorous. And because although getting released was nice, it was lovely, I still get hit unexpectedly with things that trigger bad memories, and I have a bad time over it, you know. Even out here each day is a battle, you know, with your own mind, of what you've lost and what you've sacrificed, what you're never ever going to get back. And the people that are not here anymore, you know, you still expect the door open to certain family members to walk in and that. It's never going to happen. And it hits you hard, you know. Even though now I'm ostensibly I'm free, I'm not. I'm on a piece of string. They can drag me back to prison any time they like. Well, I suppose they've got to have a valid reason, but as we all know, they can make up those reasons whenever they feel like it. So you're never free, and that life sentence carries a life license. You know, there's no end to it. The day I'm truly free is the day I die, I reckon.
I had to strip down to next to nothing, grease up, put a towel over the cut section of bar off the window so it wouldn't scratch my back, and levered myself out, while Sten wrenched that up just another little inch, probably strangling everybody he'd always hated since childhood, but just enough for me to get out.